trial over President Biden's $3.5 trillion spending plan has thrust Washington Representative Pramila Jayapal into the national spotlight as the chair of the Progressive Caucus. And Representative Jayapal joining us now live on King 5 News at noon. Good afternoon. We're glad to have you here. You have said, Representative, that you are willing to negotiate off this $3.5 trillion price tag as long as you get your priorities in. What are your priorities?
Well, Steve, thank you so much for having me on. And that's exactly right. The 96-member Congressional Progressive Caucus has been clear that we have 5 priorities. They are, first of all, the care economy. That includes making sure everyone has universal access to childcare, no family paying more than 7% of their income on childcare, paid leave, 12 weeks of paid leave that we deserve and finally will bring us to par with other countries. And then home and community-based care, which is something very, very important for all of those workers, primarily women of color and immigrant women of color workers who are looking after our most vulnerable. So that is the care economy. That's our first priority. Second priority is around housing, something incredibly important to Seattle and across the country, big investments in housing. Third, we want to make sure that we are taking on climate change with both a stick and a carrot. We want clean electricity standards and clean energy tax credits so that the president can go to COP26 in a couple of weeks and make the case that the United States is leading on taking on climate change. Fourth, we want to make sure we are expanding healthcare and particularly expanding Medicare to include dental, vision, and hearing for our seniors. And finally, but not least, we want to make sure that we're lifting up our immigrant workers who have been holding up this country. So those are the 5 priorities. And we agree with the president. This is, by the way, the president's agenda. The Build Back Better agenda is the president's agenda that we're fighting to keep on track. And we agree with him on the other piece of this, which is that this is a $0 bill. This is all going to be paid for by taxes on the wealthiest individuals and the biggest corporations paying their fair share. More than enough money that will offset these deep investments that actually will transform people's lives and leave nobody behind.
But if right-leaning Democrats aren't on board with spending that much money for all those programs, where are you willing to budge?
Well, we don't believe that we need to negotiate against ourselves. So what we've said is we're willing to negotiate. In fact, we're looking at ways that perhaps if we do have to bring down the cost from the $3.5 trillion that was agreed to by the Senate and didn't come out of thin air. It was because we wanted to provide all these priorities. We would like to hear from others that don't agree, because this is 96% of Democrats in the House and the Senate agree with the president on his agenda on this Build Back Better Act. But we understand 4% don't. We got to get them on board. We're going to sit and talk about that. But we need to hear from them. What do they want to cut and how are we going to do that? Our priority as a caucus is to keep as many of these things in there, Steve, but do it perhaps some of them for shorter time periods of funding so that people can see the immediate benefit and understand that government's got their backs.
What are the political ramifications for the Democrats, for the president, if you cannot find that consensus and get that 4% with you?
We will. I am completely confident that we will deliver both the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better Act to the president's desk. He is so excited for that to happen. This is his agenda. We are going to deliver both of them, and we're going to show people that government's got your back.
Well, the bill was supposed to pass by September 27th. That was the congressional Democrats who set that date. That obviously has come and gone. What is the timeline to get this done?
Well, that was an arbitrary deadline that was set by the 4% for just the infrastructure bill. And had we passed that, Steve, had the Congressional Progressive Caucus not stood up and fought for the Build Back Better Act, the president's agenda, then we might have been in a situation where even that bill either wouldn't have passed or would have been a tiny sliver of what we delivered to people. That is not the case now. That's an arbitrary deadline. The president made that clear to the caucus that there isn't going to be an infrastructure bill without the reconciliation bill. And that is actually our strength in putting these two back on the table together, is what has allowed us to continue to make sure we deliver on the entirety of the agenda.
And when do you expect that to happen?
Well, let's hope it happens soon. I'm still here in Washington, D.C., unfortunately not back home, because I'm working on this every single day, negotiating with the White House, making sure that negotiating with everybody that needs to be in the room to get us all on the same page. But I'm confident we're going to deliver. And I'll tell you what, it's going to be incredible for people across this country. They're going to wake up and feel differently, not just have a road or a bridge, but they're going to actually have the wherewithal to get on that road because they've got childcare, because they've got health care, paid leave, because we're taking on climate change and leaving a planet for their kids and grandkids.
Representative Pramila Jayapal, thank you so much for joining us live here on King 5 News at noon.
Thank you, Steve.